Have you ever thought about this? What if a physicist, someone trying to understand the very fabric of life, and a spiritual teacher, someone exploring the nature of consciousness, what if they both arrived at the exact same fundamental metaphor to explain reality? Well, that's what we're going to dive in today. We're going to look at two seemingly different worlds that might just be describing the same thing.
So this is really a tale of two webs, and on the surface, they couldn't seem more different. You've got one idea coming from the super rigorous, nuts and bolts world of science, and the other, it comes from the deep, inner world of spiritual practice. But here's the thing, they both use the image of a web to describe the very essence of our existence.
All right, let's break this down. First up, we've got physicist Fritjof Capra. He talks about the web of life. For him, this is the complex, interconnected network of relationships that links every single living thing. His point is powerful. We didn't create this web, and we're not in charge of it. We're just a single strand in it. Then, on the other side of the coin, you have the spiritual teacher Ram Dass. He talks about the web of desire. This is the web inside of us, that tangle of thoughts, beliefs, and attachments that makes up our ego. It's the story we tell ourselves about the world. And for him, freedom means learning how to untangle ourselves from that very web.
So this is the big one, the million-dollar question, right? Are these two webs actually connected? Could it be that Capra's outer web of life and Ram Dass's inner web of the mind are, two sides of the same coin? That's what we're here to explore.
Okay, but before we can connect those dots, we got to rewind a bit. We need to understand the old operating system that was running the world's thinking for centuries. And believe me, it wasn't a web, not even close. For a long, long time, the world was seen as a machine.
Yeah, this was the old map. It was drawn up by the absolute heavyweights of the scientific revolution. Descartes, Galileo, Newton. They looked at the universe and saw this giant, magnificent clock. Tick-tock. Perfectly predictable. They figured you could understand anything, from a planet to a person, by just taking it apart and studying the pieces.
And this is where it gets really wild. Because this way of thinking, it just took over everything. The universe? A perfect machine. Reality? Just find the smallest little building blocks, the tiniest Legos, and you've got it figured out. And Galileo, he famously just kicked quality right out of science. If you couldn't measure it, sorry, it wasn't real. This led Descartes to see the human body as just another machine, creating this huge, deep split between our minds and the physical world.
And wow, this quote from the psychiatrist R.D. Laing, it just hits you right in the gut, doesn't it? We had to destroy the world in theory before we could destroy it in practice. Think about that. When you start seeing the world as just a dead machine made of separate parts, it becomes a whole lot easier to treat it that way. This wasn't just some abstract theory. It had very real consequences.
And this is where Capra says we're still stuck. He calls it a crisis of perception. Basically, all our huge, scary problems today, from climate change to social division, they aren't technical problems at their core. They're seeing problems. We're using an old, broken map that tells us everything is separate to try and navigate a world that is deeply, fundamentally connected.
But then, things started to change. A new story, a new map began to take shape in the 20th century. Science started to realize, wait a minute, maybe it's not a machine after all. Maybe it's a network.
I love this comparison because it just makes so much sense. The old way of thinking was like building a skyscraper, right? You need these super strong, fundamental laws at the bottom, and you just stack everything else on top in a neat hierarchy. But the new way? It's a web. There is no bottom. Every single point is important because of how it connects to every other point. Nothing is fundamental because everything depends on everything else. So, this whole new way of looking at things, it's called systems thinking. And the core idea? Honestly, it's so simple, but it changes everything. You can't understand a living thing by just breaking it into pieces. The properties of life itself, that spark, that aliveness, it's not in the pieces. It emerges from the pattern, from the relationships that connect the whole thing together.
So what does this shift actually look like? Well, we start moving from looking at just the parts to seeing the whole thing, from obsessing over objects to understanding relationships. We bring quality back into the picture. We see that process is just as important as structure, and we start looking for patterns, not just contents. This goes all the way down to quantum physics, where it turns out that particles aren't even really things, but more like interconnections in a cosmic web. It's pretty mind-bending.
All right, so let's get to the heart of it. If life isn't about the stuff it's made of, but about its pattern, then what is that pattern? What's the secret sauce that makes something alive?
The answer has this amazing name, autopoiesis. It sounds complicated, but it just means self-making. And this is the key. A living system is a network where every single part helps to create or maintain all the other parts. The whole thing is constantly rebuilding itself from the inside out, moment by moment. And this is where you get this really cool paradox. A living system is organizationally closed. It knows what's it and what's not it. It has its own identity, its own boundary. But at the same exact time, it's completely open to the world. It needs a constant stream of energy and matter from its environment just to keep that self-making process going. It's both autonomous and totally dependent. I don't think I've ever heard a better analogy for this than the one from Norbert Wiener, one of the pioneers of this kind of thinking. We're like a whirlpool in a river. The water is always changing, always flowing through, but the pattern, the whirlpool itself, stays the same. We aren't the stuff that lasts. We are the pattern that keeps going. Just, wow. Okay, hang on, because this is where we take a giant leap. We're about to connect this hardcore science of self-making patterns with consciousness itself. This is where those two webs we talked about at the beginning, they're about to touch.
So this biologist, Humberto Maturana, he came along with this idea that is just absolutely mind-blowing. He basically said, living is knowing. They're not two different things. They're the same exact process. That process of self-making, of autopoiesis, is cognition. A simple bacterium doesn't have a brain, but it knows its world. It senses, it responds, it maintains its pattern. To be alive is to know.
Now just think about what that means. If living is the same as knowing, then you're not just a camera passively recording a world that's already out there. Nope. Through your interactions, through the very process of being alive, you are actively, constantly bringing forth a world. Reality isn't something you find, it's something you make, moment by moment, in relationship with everything else.
So, that kind of puts it back on us, doesn't it? If your entire life is a process of cognition, if your being is a way of creating a world, then the question becomes intensely personal. What kind of world are you bringing forth? Right now, with your actions, your thoughts, your relationships. Okay, so where does all this heady stuff leave us? Well, here's the beautiful part. If we really understand how the web of life actually works, we can use that as a roadmap for our own lives. The science can teach us how to be, wiser. How to weave a better web, both inside and out. And these are nature's rules of the game, the core principles of ecology. It's all about interdependence, we're all in it together. Nature works in cycles, so there's really no such thing as waste. Healthy systems are flexible and can adapt. Diversity creates resilience. And get this, life didn't conquer the planet by fighting. It did it by networking and partnership. Sustainability isn't some extra feature you add on. It's the natural outcome when you live by these rules.
And that brings us right back to where we started, to that incredible quote. It's not just a nice, poetic thought anymore, is it? It's a statement of scientific, systemic fact. We are the web. What you do to it, you are literally, physically, doing to yourself. The two webs are one.
So, here's the final thought. The great web of life out there and the web of your own conscious world, they're not separate. They're woven together. So knowing that, knowing you are an active strand in this vast self-creating tapestry, what are you going to do with your part of the web today?